And good morning, everybody, and welcome to SBN College Football Saturdays. And of course, for the second straight week, we start out with some Auburn. And then, of course, today we're doing things a little bit different. We're going to have the recording of college football wraparound from Wednesday night. That'll play. And then, of course, near the end of the show is college football wraparound to preview some of the action coming up tonight. And of course, later tonight, you got Kentucky and Georgia here on the channel. So, great day of football right here on Saver Broadcast Network. And joining me now is Derek. How are you?
Good.
All right. So, of course, right now I'm trying to get my computer on the with the schedule and all to act correct with me. But yeah. So, of course, we're going to start out with some questions, and then we're going to recap Auburn and Georgia. Then later in the show, we're going to talk about what does Auburn have to do to be competitive the rest of the season. And then we got some game picks, and we're going to do all that here in this 20-minute increment. So, let's start out with our questions. What was Auburn's win streak versus number one ranked teams? Anything to add on that, Derek?
Till losing to Georgia, not counting the Georgia streak, because they did lose. And in case y'all watched the Auburn versus Georgia game, this was one of the little fun facts they gave. So, in case you watched that game, you might be able to know the answer.
Okay. And then our last question is, who coached Auburn and Georgia in the same sport? Anything to add on that, Derek?
Make sure to say the sport and the head coach. And you'll have to go back pretty far to do this question. And this was the Aflac trivia question on the Auburn-Georgia game.
All right. So now let's get into talking about that Auburn-Georgia game. Derek, of course, you saw the whole game. I saw bits and pieces of the game. And so, Derek, what was your take from the game?
Pretty much Auburn had a great run game. Their defense held up good. They came out in the start of the game, got up 10-0. They let Georgia come and get tied up at 10-0. And then Auburn got 10 more points and got up 10. Georgia came back. And then pretty much Auburn and Georgia had pretty much nobody could score in the second half, really. And Auburn's run game was pretty good. And the wide receivers only got 88 yards, and they didn't throw the ball much. But in today's football, you have to throw the ball more. But Auburn's not that good of a throwing team this year. So Auburn has to stick to the run. So in case they can get the run game going, it will be good. But in case they can't, it's going to be a long year for Auburn. And in case they lose any more running backs, it's going to be pretty bad. But I'm pretty much skipping ahead to the end of the game. Auburn's wide receivers has to catch the ball. Even if it's above your head a little, in case your hands touch it, you should catch it. And the player behind you should not be able to intercept the ball. Pretty much, I'm going to go back a little bit. On 3rd and 9, Auburn threw the ball to one of the wide receivers. The pass was a little high. He threw it. The wide receiver had his hands on it, and it just went straight through his hands. Then, on 4th and 9, they threw the ball. It was great pass. It was probably an 8-yard throw, and Auburn the Georgia player came over the top and intercepted it. Case Auburn could have had a better chance. They could have won this game. The way they could have won it is case that wide receiver on the 4th and 9 could have fell down while that Georgia player was going to intercept the ball, and there would be a passing interference, automatic first down, and then you can go down and try to get a touchdown. So that was my intake of it. I'll pass it on to Cooper now.
Well, from what I saw, the early portion of the game, Georgia just they didn't really to me feel like a team that had just won 2 straight championships to me. It felt more like Auburn controlled the game in the first half, and that was, I mean, for the most part it was just their run game. And I'll say this. I think it does, even though the first half was not what Georgia wanted. I think you got to look at that second half for Georgia. And that's where I feel like it brings the aspect of you just won 2 straight national championships and you've got Brock Bowers on the team. And really, he took over in that second half because if I believe correctly, he had like 1 catch the whole first half. So, I mean, he was
Yeah,
very.
he had like 2 targets, 1 catch, and no yards after catch. Run yards after catch.
So, I mean, the thing is, the first half, Auburn limited Brock Bowers. The second half, they couldn't do nothing about him. So here's my question: is if Auburn, let's say Auburn would have played like just play double coverage on Brock Bowers the whole game, it could have been different for Auburn because then if you have double coverage, possibly you stop Brock Bowers. But then, of course, you allow. There's a lot more that can be allowed whenever you play double coverage on one single player. And so I will say this. Auburn, there was a part of me that was impressed with how Auburn played against Georgia. And I mean, and, I mean, it's a home game and it's a rivalry game. Auburn normally plays good in rivalry home games. So,
Yep.
It was a good game to watch for sure. And so I will say though, Georgia, I think is not a team to sleep on, but I don't know if this is because they've won 2 straight championships, new quarterback. I feel like it's totally different for Georgia. I don't think they're going to win the championship. They don't right now. They don't look like a team that can win the championship, but they do look like a team that could be in the playoff. That's just what I see from Georgia right now. So, all right, let's turn our attention now. So Derek, what does Auburn have to do to be competitive the rest of the season?
Pretty much keep the run game going and get the pass game where you're at least getting over 150 yards every game. And at least in 100 yards in passing yards. And then keep the running backs healthy. And then the other thing is defense, hold on tight and keep it up. Because in case Auburn's defense starts getting hurt and Marcus I forgot his first name, but Marcus, a big number 50, in case he gets hurt and out for the rest of the season, Auburn better be prepared for case he does. And Auburn has one a player, Jalen Simpson, which has 4 interceptions already this year. So, case Auburn can keep up the interceptions rolling and the turnovers, it'll be good. But Auburn has to get the offense going better. Case Auburn wants to beat LSU this coming up week, Auburn has to go into LSU and play like they've never played before this year, and let the offense roll and the defense hold. The offense has to be able to throw the ball, and the defense has to be able to keep pressure on Jalen. I forgot his name. Jaden Daniels. In case they can keep pressure on Jaden Daniels and not let him get out of the pocket, Auburn will have a good game, I think. And that's one problem against Auburn. What Auburn had against Georgia. Auburn blew the game pretty much against Georgia by not keeping pressure on the quarterback. Auburn barely even pressured Carson Beck, and I think they might got one or two, maybe two sacks, but they barely got any sacks. So Auburn has to keep pressure and start getting some more sacks. So I turn it over to you, Cooper.
Yeah, for Auburn, for me, they've got to find, they got to establish the passing game somehow. And they've got to, I mean, you don't have to throw it all that much, but then also, I mean, you got to try to keep the defense guessing, because if Auburn just runs the football all game and just never passes the ball, then the defense, it just becomes predictable. And so Auburn's got to somehow find something in the playbook that both your quarterbacks, and I think that's another thing, is you've got to establish who is the guy. And I mean, from what I see, if there's someone that Auburn's going to choose right now, I feel like it's most likely Peyton Thorne is who Hugh Freeze is going to go to, because in a way I feel like he does bring just a tiny bit more in the passing game than what Robbie Ashford does. So the thing is, Auburn's got to establish some passing game. And I think they can get a lot of confidence this upcoming week against LSU, because if we're all being honest, LSU to allow 55 points to Ole Miss, and the way that LSU, their two losses. Okay. You go back to their two losses so far this season, LSU's allowed 45, 55. Their game against Arkansas, I think it was like 31 they gave to Arkansas. So I mean, the thing is that for Auburn, if you have an SEC game that you could potentially get some kind of momentum on offense going, which I think Georgia gave you some momentum because you learned the run game is pretty good. You got to figure out, can you get momentum in the passing game against LSU? That's the big thing for me, because if they can get some momentum through the air, I feel like Auburn could then get some momentum for the rest of the season. Now, does that mean that Auburn, if they play good against LSU, that they could possibly win they could possibly win every game, but I just don't see that happening because of how stacked the SEC is this season. So I feel like Auburn has got to establish the passing game. So that's my big thing right now with Auburn. So, all right. Now, for our final 6 minutes of our segment, we've got 4 games to pick through here in the SEC. Derek will pick first on all of these. And we begin today with Arkansas at Ole Miss.
This is going to be a hard game for me to pick, but after Ole Miss coming off that big win against LSU, I think Ole Miss actually will pull out this game against Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss will win the game against Arkansas.
I'll say this. I feel like Arkansas has a tougher defense than what LSU does, especially with the fact of the secondary. I feel like Arkansas possibly has a better secondary than what LSU does. Because, I mean, that's where LSU got hurt with all the deep passes that Ole Miss hit all game long last week. So, my thing is, I mean, I would pick Ole Miss to win this game, but don't expect it to be a shootout like it was last week for Ole Miss. I mean, I think what you're looking at with this game is more of a, I would say, 28-24 type game. Something that's not as high scoring, but still the defenses are not incredible. That's just what I see from this game.
Yeah, in case
So,
I had to give a score, I would probably give 38, 35, probably. Not too high, but also not too low. Because I think they're going to allow some chunk plays to go. So.
yep. All right. Our next one, LSU and Missouri, coming up at 11 o'clock this morning. Derek?
I'm having a hard time picking this one. Missouri, last year they played against Oklahoma, not Oklahoma. They played against Georgia at home, almost beat them. Then they played against Kansas State this year and beat them because of a 61-yard field goal. But I think LSU will come into this game and win and be ready for those long field goal attempts. And I think LSU has a better team and then Missouri has.
Well, Missouri's undefeated this season. LSU's 3-2 to this point in the season. Um, Missouri's got a lot of momentum going, being undefeated. And of course, they had that home win against Kansas State that was big. There's just a gut feeling I have that Missouri pulls this game out because, like I said, LSU's defense is really non existent. And so I think if Missouri's offense can capitalize on it, I think Missouri gets the home win. So, all right. Our next one, Alabama and Texas A&M playing in College Station, Texas. So, Derek, where are you going on this one?
This one's a hard pick for me. In case it was at 6:30 game, I would know my answer by now, right at the beginning, and what I'm gonna pick. Uh, but since it's at 2:30, it's a harder pick for me. I think Texas A&M has a great team this year, but in case Alabama plays like they played against South Florida, they're gonna lose for sure. I think actually Texas A&M probably pulls this out. I trusted Ole Miss to beat Alabama, but I have no trust in Ole Miss to beat. In case they had to play Alabama again, I would pick Alabama to win because I just don't feel Ole Miss can beat Alabama at this state they are. But back to the game we're on. I think Alabama will have a fit, and I think Texas A&M is going to win.
I'm going Bama. And the reason why I say Bama is because I think if you watch how they played last week against Mississippi State, I think at the end, like the second half against Ole Miss and then the Mississippi State game, Bama has figured out what they want to do. And I feel like Milroe is starting to become a better quarterback. Now, I'm not saying he's incredible, but just to be honest with you, this just feels a lot like I think it was 2014 when Bama they lost on the road at Ole Miss early in the season, and then they just beat the crap out of Texas A&M, and they looked good the rest of the season. Made their way to the first ever college football playoff, and then to lose to Ohio State in the playoff. I feel like you got a similar season for Alabama, so I'm going Bama on this one. I'm not. I think this is a lot closer. I think this is a close game, but I gotta go Bama. All right, and finally, Derek, you get to pick this one. I can't because I'm calling it Kentucky and Georgia. Who are you going with?
You can say go Cats, or you can say go Dogs. I'm going with the Dogs in this game. I think Georgia is going to win. So go Georgia. It's going to be a really good game, but I think Georgia's going to win this game. I think Kirby Smart gave them an earful about how they played against Auburn.
All right. Well, that is our SEC game picks. We will see next week how we did. And so, Derek, thanks for coming on. And we got to go to commercial, and then it'll be our replay from Wednesday night. We'll be right back. And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first Wednesday night I've done in the last 2 weeks. I can't believe that last week I did not bring you any content. Of course, for that um I was just coming home from a long trip that I had been on, and I decided that I didn't want to actually do anything on that Wednesday night, so I just kind of crashed. Could have brought you something that Thursday night, but kind of procrastinated, and then Friday night didn't do anything either. Just kind of, procrastinated again. And of course, Saturday brought you college football wraparound and your SBN college football Saturdays as usual. And then I brought you Iowa State, Oklahoma. And now we're back to regular scheduled programming. Of course, Sunday you saw I put out my rankings. So let's go ahead and dive into the rankings. So number one, numbers 1 through 8, no change. So you got Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, Florida State, Penn State, USC, Alabama as your top 8. Now, I will say this. There's a couple of places here you may be wondering, why do I have them as I do? Okay, let's explain. Ohio State, they didn't play last week. And by far, of any team this season, you could argue between Ohio State and Texas and Georgia, in my opinion. But I think Ohio State has the best win so far. That or Texas going to Alabama. Both of them are going to have it's a big thing right there. If you look from the national rankings, where teams were, I believe Alabama was number 3. Notre Dame was 9, maybe. Either way, that's not to say that neither one of the games were. They both were the same caliber. If you look at it from Texas or Ohio State's view, right now though, watching the teams, I feel like Ohio State's a better team than Texas. So that's how I've got it so far. So, and then you look at Georgia. Of course, you may be saying, "Wow, you still have a lot of faith in Georgia, even though they just struggled against Auburn." Well, let me tell you this though, because Georgia and Auburn, big rivalry there. And you're going to Auburn. I'm just going to be honest with you. In college football, a win is a win. And to go on the road and win the way they did, I got to say, I still think they're the second best team in the country. Now, of course, they're going to have to get better. And Saturday, I'm going to preview that Georgia Kentucky game. And I got to tell you, Georgia's still one of the best teams. Brock Bowers is a great player, so you got to watch out for Georgia. Other placement right here. Florida State, of course, not moving, not having not played. USC, I don't believe they played this past week. No, they did. Did I not update their ranking? I mean, their record? I must not have. Either way, that's a mistake on me. Of course, they beat Colorado. And of course, as you see here in the top 10, making their first appearance in the top 10 this season is Washington. So, of course, very interesting for the top 10. And then we go to the 11 through 25. You got North Carolina, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Missouri, Kansas State, Washington State, Tulane, Oregon State, Duke, Utah, Kansas, and Miami of Florida. Now, I will say this. I mean, okay. Oklahoma, in my opinion, because I know that's one that we have a little bit of disagreements probably. I will say this. Oklahoma, they got a big game this week against Texas. If they beat Texas, I got to tell you, they are going to be very high. I just don't know if any of their wins have really been what you would consider like big time wins. I mean, I'm trying to think because so far in conference you've gone to Cincinnati, you beat Iowa State at home. You went to Tulsa and won pretty big. You beat SMU, you beat Arkansas State pretty bad at home. So I mean, Oklahoma, I think 14 for now is pretty accurate because they haven't really played a big time competition until they play Texas this week. It's going to be big. Very, very big if you are Oklahoma. So, another team right here. And that really is, I think Kansas is one that people are looking at. At 4-1, I know they lost big time to Texas. But here's the thing. And people are saying about Auburn, in the chat I see about Auburn. Here's the thing, though, folks. Auburn's got no significant win. I mean, let's be honest. Auburn going to Cal, Cal's not that great of a team. Yeah, it's incredible to see you go out on the road and win a game, but Auburn played terrible in that game. And then, yeah, they almost beat Georgia, but you don't reward a team by putting them in the rankings for losing. You just don't do that. That's why I think Kansas is a better team right now. Because Kansas, although they did lose, you can see I did drop them a spot. I still think Kansas I think Kansas is a good team. They got a lot of great players on that team. And not to mention, they got a great coach. And then you look at Miami of Florida, a team that's kind of gone under the radar so far. And, they got the win against Texas A&M, which Texas A&M is starting to look really good, even though Connor Wigman's out. And now they're having to rely on Max Johnson. Big thing for A&M. You got Alabama at home Saturday. How do you do against Alabama? Miami, of course, they got Georgia Tech coming up. So that'll be interesting. Of course, Georgia Tech's not really that good, but Still, a conference game is a big game, nonetheless. Um, Utah, I still feel like they're one of the top 25 teams in the country because I think if Cam Rising, whenever he comes back and if he's fully healthy, Utah's a great team. They're hard to stop. But here's the thing, the Pac 12 is loaded this season. In what is their final season as the Pac 12 as we know it, this is, I mean, to be honest, this is a good way to send your teams out by having the best conference in college football. Let's be honest, because that's quite frankly what it is. Because you got some of the best teams in college football this season. And so, other than that, Kentucky. Let me tell you, Kentucky, if they are able to run the ball with Ray Davis the way they were against Florida every single week, Kentucky is a scary good team. Now, of course, going up against that Georgia D line, that's going to be interesting to see how do they run the football. But here's the thing. That's a big game because Kentucky, I think, has a chance in this game. Not going to say they're going to beat Georgia. Not going to say Georgia's going to beat Kentucky either. I'm just saying this is a good game. This is one I think a lot of people are going to write off because they think Georgia's going to probably beat the crap out of Kentucky at home. But you know what? This is a game, folks, I think you need to watch because this is a game I think that's going to be super close and it's going to come down to the very end of the game. And of course, Ole Miss, I had to move them back up to 16 after their home win against LSU. My concern about Ole Miss, their defense. I understand you played a good offense in LSU. You gave up 49 points. You put it 55 yourself. But the thing is, you can't have a repeat. You can't have a repeat of what you had against Alabama. And your defense is going to have to show up. I don't know if I don't think Ole Miss can expect to go on the road and win a shootout against, let's say, Georgia. Ole Miss can't do that. So they're going to have to play a lot better when it comes to defensive wise. So they give their offense just a chance to not have to worry so much when it comes to having to put up 60 points a game. So, of course, that right there is my top 25. Of course, I have a lot of comments coming in about opinions on the rankings. So, of course, a lot of opinions on it. So now, let's turn our attention to our first topic and let's talk about Michigan State. Now, you may be thinking, why are we talking about Michigan State? Well, Mel Tucker's gone now. So now it's time to talk about who could we potentially see replacing Mel Tucker. Now, folks, when Mel Tucker took the job, I was not sold on him because, let's be honest, he was at Colorado for 1 year. He did nothing. He did nothing in Colorado. Yeah, he was a pretty decent coach, I think he was like a defensive coordinator at Georgia before he got the Colorado job. I mean, he was good at Georgia, but that's as a coordinator. And he spent 1 year at Colorado, and then he comes to Michigan State. They have their great year, and everybody's like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest coach to come through Michigan State in forever. Of course, before him was Mark D'Antonio, who was pretty good. And so he has the one good year, and then since then, it's just been down the drain. Michigan State cannot do anything at all. And so now Mel Tucker is out after some pretty bad stuff he was involved in. I don't want to go into detail about that because it's pretty bad stuff and really kind of want to shy away from that kind of talk anyway. But so now we've got candidates to take over, and this is coming from Michigan State. This is just their site where, Michigan State people talk about what could happen. So when we look at the candidates right now, they've got Mike Elko listed first as as probably the top candidate, and um, and they're just saying because he's one of the hottest candidates because in his first season he took Duke to a 9-4 record, had a great season, and then um, and then of course this year they started 4-1. Of course they had the big win week 1 against Clemson, and then um and of course you have of course their only loss being to um only loss coming to Notre Dame at home this past weekend. Um Mike Elko I think is a good name, but do I think he's the best choice? I don't think he would be the best choice. And the reason why I say that is you go from Duke to Michigan State. And again, do you want another guy that I mean, let's be honest, just started at a place like Duke? Could we see another, I mean, okay, from a coaching standpoint, and not any kind of off the field issues, but just from a coaching standpoint, I don't know if it would be any different from what you are seeing, what you saw from Mel Tucker. So that's just my opinion. In my opinion, I do not think Mike Elko is the best choice. Now, if he was hired and he does a great job, well, I'm wrong. But I don't think he's the best choice at the moment. Listed secondly is Jonathan Smith, the head coach at Oregon State. Now, this one I think would be a really great hire. Difference between him and Mike Elko, Jonathan Smith has been at Oregon State for what feels like forever. He's currently in his 6th season at Oregon State, and let's be honest, he's turned this program around. They now are, because last year was a 10-3 season. This year they look like they could be a 10-win team again. Here's the thing. I think he would be a great name. I think Jonathan Smith would be a great hire. I just feel like for what he's done at Oregon State, bringing that program back, who was at one time, I think when he first inherited the program, they went okay, so here it says in the 4 seasons prior to last year, they were 12-16 overall. And when you look at those records, 2-10, 5-7, 2-5, because of course the 2-5 was from the COVID season. And 2021, he was 7-6. 2022, which was last year, 10-3. So I'm just being honest. He's kept his job at a place like Oregon State because, let's be honest, nobody really wants the Oregon State job unless you're a guy who's looking to work his way up into the coaching ranks. Jonathan Smith, I think, has done a great job, and I think he's put Oregon State on the map when it comes to college football. And I think this is a great hire. If Michigan State were to go after Jonathan Smith, I think it's a great hire because he's more experienced than Mike Elko as a head coach at this current time. So that's just my opinion. Now, some names that, of course, there's a bunch of others on here, but if I had to name off maybe who I think would be the best choice, why not Pat Narduzzi from Pitt? Look what he did. He had Kenny Pickett. I mean, he was Heisman caliber quarterback he had. And then after that, Pitt's still been able to, I wouldn't say, you know, they haven't been incredible, but I mean, they haven't really shied away from being good enough to make a bowl game. Pat Narduzzi's a good coach. And he had coached at Michigan State back a while back. I think Pat Narduzzi deserves a chance to be the head coach at Michigan State. Now, another name that's been thrown out there is Urban Meyer, but folks, we all know that ain't happening. At least I hope not, because let's be honest, Urban Meyer brings too much baggage when it comes to, you know, you get him, you may have him for a few years, and then, oh, look, I'm sick again. I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of Urban Meyer. I'm just stating the obvious fact that when it came to Florida, I believe he used the excuse of he got sick. Of course, Ohio State, he said he was sick. You know what the real thing was though? It's behind the scenes things that was going on with Urban Meyer. That he resigned because of health issues. I mean, I'm just being honest. Urban Meyer needs to just sit on that Fox desk and just be done. That is where I think Urban Meyer thrives the best. He doesn't need to coach anymore because he's done all he can. And I mean, he's won 2 national championships. He's won one at Florida and one at Ohio State. How many coaches can say that other than Nick Saban and Urban Meyer? How many coaches can actually say, I won a championship at two, I won 2 championships and they were at 2 different schools? I don't know. But very interesting stuff there in East Lansing, Michigan. We'll see what happens, but Michigan State definitely has themselves they sure got themselves a coaching search that it'll be interesting. Who will be their head coach? All right. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and if you have any questions, if you have any questions for me, it is your chance to ask questions. I'm going to get some stuff pulled up for the remainder of the show. So while I do, if you have any questions, please put that in chat and I will answer them. About as soon as possible. But, okay. Is Notre Dame still a playoff contender? Well, yes. And the only reason why is because they're 5-1 right now. You've got USC coming up, but first you got to get through Louisville. And let me tell you, Louisville with their new coach, Jeff Brom, Louisville's a team you're going to want to watch. And this Saturday, it'll be interesting. So I think Notre Dame still has a chance because let's be honest, an 11-1 Notre Dame team is getting into the playoff because look at who they had to play all season. Yeah, they're getting in if they're 11-1. And Sam Hartman definitely is good enough to get his team there. Let's be honest with us. And if let's be honest too, if they had 11 men on the field against Ohio State, they probably win that game. And then the whole tune of what's going on now about Notre Dame can't win a big game, it would have been in reverse that Ohio State can't win the big game. We all knew that coming into this game that is what was going to happen. So, all right, let's get to more of the questions. Does Auburn have a chance against Arkansas? To be honest with you, it'll be close. but I don't think Auburn's the better team right now. I think Arkansas is a better team than Auburn. So, um, is Kansas State going to lead the Big 12 from now on? Well, actually, if you think about it, Kansas State has been pretty consistent. Chris Kleiman, let me tell you, if you talk about a guy who is very underrated, then Chris Kleiman, I think, is underrated, and his team's underrated. Kansas State's been pretty good. Now, they're not good enough to beat some of the better teams when it comes to the Power Five, but you know what? They're a quality team. They could. I could see that. Let's see here. Is Auburn a 7-5 team? Probably at best. If I'm being honest, that is at best, I think 7-5 is what Auburn's going to be this season. And at worst, I could see 4-8, 5-7. Because Auburn, to be honest with you, is just not, they're not incredible. Georgia and Auburn, that game, it's a rivalry game for a reason. And when you go to Auburn, you got to play, and you're a number one team, which, you know, it's pretty incredible to see how Auburn plays against number one teams at home. So, I mean, let's be honest. Georgia probably should have won bigger, but Georgia still won the game. Let's see. Is TCU gonna get back to back? Going to get back to last season's success? No, not at all, because they're not that good as what they were last year. They lost too much. Will the Auburn game be decided by 3 points? Potentially. So, we'll give you a few more minutes. I've got some stats ready to go. And, of course, very interesting stuff. Oh, if you're talking about the Iron Bowl, I'm sorry. Auburn's got no chance in that Iron Bowl because I think Alabama will just roll over Auburn. If you're looking at it right now. Because sorry. Just I don't have a lot of hope that Auburn would actually do that good against Alabama. Especially they're not going to, with how terrible their offense is, Auburn's is, and Alabama's defense this season. Yeah, Auburn better be lucky they get 3 points in that game. Who is your Heisman favorite? Ooh, here we go. That is something that I'll answer. I kind of like that. Right now, well, from what I've seen, I would say Drake May's up there. I don't know if Quinn Ewers, I mean, he's played good, but I don't know right now if he's really a Heisman favorite kind of quarterback. I mean, I don't think Caleb Williams will win it, but I feel like he's in that race. But right now, I think if I had to choose a Heisman, I would probably say Drake May. So, let's see. Who would win, Ohio State or Texas? Right now, I think Ohio State would win the game. Okay, this question, Jalen Milroe is not anywhere close to Heisman contention. Is USC a playoff team? Yeah, I think they are totally capable, but let's see how they do the rest of the season, because I'm not completely sold that they can win a game in the playoff because of their defense. I mean, it's pretty evident against Colorado. Who is Palm Tree? Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. For as far as Heisman, probably I'd probably say Bo Nix. Um, and then also is Bo Nix a Heisman? He definitely could be. All right. So if you have any more questions, that is fine, but I am going to move on because um I've gotten a little bit behind. So let's talk about Georgia and their game against Auburn. So I wanted to bring up the stats because when you look at the score and then the amount, like the total yards for these teams, to be honest with you, it seems misleading when you look at the yards and then you see the score because you would think this was a lot higher scoring. So Georgia ended up winning the game 27-20 to continue being a undefeated team. Of course, Auburn now at 3-2. So of course, when you look at the first downs, Georgia 19, Auburn 17. Third down efficiency. Here's what this is part of what killed Auburn. Auburn was 2 of 12 on third down, where Georgia was 8 of 13. Fourth down efficiency, Auburn was 1 of 3. Georgia never went for it. Total yards, Georgia 420. Auburn 307. When you look at the passing yards, Georgia 313, Auburn 88. You look at the run game, Auburn 219, Georgia 107. Okay, so yeah, the way Auburn wins a game is they got to run the ball and literally do nothing else but run the ball. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. And of course, penalties, clean game. Georgia had 3 for 30, and then Auburn had 1 for 5. Georgia had 2 turnovers, so 1 turnover for Auburn. And then time of possession, Auburn commanded that. So, how did Georgia win this game? Because when you are one of the top teams in college football and you've won 2 championships in a row and you've got the one of the best players, here's another guy I think's in the Heisman race, Brock Bowers, even though he's probably not going to win because he's a tight end. He ain't winning the Heisman. But when you got guys like Brock Bowers on your team who's won championships, who knows how to win a game, well, you know what? You're going to find a way to win even though you play when you turn the ball over 2 times, when you can't control the time of possession, when things look like you actually should lose this game, you find a way. Because Brock Bowers, 8 receptions, 157 yards. He had a touchdown. Now, I do remember he had I believe he had another touchdown or something like that that was called off. Either way, Brock Bowers is incredible. Very big for that Georgia team. Um, Other than that, as far as I mean, the ball was just distributed very evenly towards all the other players as far as in the passing game. Leading rusher for Georgia was Dejon Edwards, 19 carries, 76 yards. So, yeah, the thing is, Georgia found a way to win this game. And then also Carson Beck, 23 of 33, 313 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Here's the thing. What I saw from that game though, Carson Beck, he was this you got to cut him just a tiny bit of slack here cuz your first true road game that you play in conference is Auburn. That's not easy. I feel like he did a good job of controlling the game as the quarterback. And then some of the throws he made were put maybe in the best place possible. Now, some of them were a little behind his receiver, but when you have Brock Bowers, he can catch about anything. But Carson Beck, I don't think he played an amazing game, but he played good enough to win for Georgia. And that's all Georgia needs is just be good enough to win. Because I don't think you have to be Stetson Bennett. Now, I will say Stetson Bennett is not one. I don't think he's incredible at quarterback. But the thing is that Stetson Bennett had that mindset like he was going to win this for his team. That's why Georgia was successful and got 2 championships because they got the right attitude out of the quarterback as far as I'm going to win a national championship. Now, as far as other kind of attitude when it comes to how you're acting and all, I was not impressed with Stetson Bennett. But either way, I mean, that's kind of how all players are anyway. Everybody has an ego. So I mean, either way, and then we look at Auburn in this game. Peyton Thorne, 10 of 19, 82 yards, and an interception. Robbie Ashford, 1 of 1 for 6 yards. And then running the ball, Peyton Thorne, 12 for 92 yards. Jarquez Hunter, 19 for 59. Brian Batty, 8 for 35. Robbie Ashford, 4 for 33. Receiving game, just nowhere to be found. I mean, really nowhere to be found. I'm just being honest with you. But when you look at that game, Auburn played at home, arguably played a better game than Georgia. But when Georgia's a national champion and they have that will to win, you find a way. So next we're going to talk about Colorado and USC, a game that really looked pretty bad in the first half. I mean, it was about as bad as 34-7. And what do you know if Colorado nearly made a comeback in this game? The final score was 48-41. As I'm working on getting some stats from this game. And I got to tell you, the idea that Colorado was without Travis Hunter and Shiloh Sanders and still had a chance to win this game, I don't think this really says, okay, the defense for USC's. No. USC's defense is terrible. Okay? This is the problem that USC had last year. And this is why they're not going to win a national championship. They need to play defense a whole lot better than what they have. Had to take a sip of water real quick for those of you listening on podcast. But the thing is, USC, I have not been sold since Lincoln Riley got there that by getting Lincoln Riley, they would automatically just be right there as one of the top teams in college football and win the national championship. Now, right now, I do think they are a really good team. But when it comes to, when it comes to the idea of them actually winning a national championship, I've not been sold on that. I think they are, of course, in the playoff contention, but they are not a championship caliber team yet. So look at the passing yards in total. 403 for USC, 371 for Colorado. Running game, USC had 95, Colorado had 193. Turnovers, USC had 1, Colorado had 1. Of course, time of possession, Colorado controlled that, 32 minutes to 28 minutes. So, a little bit right there. So, I mean, total yards, Colorado had more yards, 564 to 498 in this game. So you're looking at, over 1,000 yards between these teams. Caleb Williams was 30 of 40 for 403, six touchdowns, 1 interception. Wow. Though for 6 touchdowns. And I mean, Lloyd was your top as far as running game. Lloyd 13 for 84 and a touchdown. Receiving, your top one was Washington, 8 for 117 and a touchdown. Rice had 5 for 81 and 2 touchdowns. I mean, and then you look at Colorado. Shador Sanders, 30 of 45, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Run game, Hankerson, 16 for 74 and a touchdown. And then you look at the receiving game. Miller had 7 for 96 and a touchdown. Horn had 7 for 84 for 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, you look at that, very offensive side of the game. Colorado probably, I mean, they definitely didn't win the game. But this was an incredible game. So, the fact that Colorado even had a chance to come back at the end is pretty incredible. So, all right. Now, for the final few minutes of the show, I'm going to pull the slides back up. Of course, it's going to pull the rankings back up, but I'm going to. All right. So, you're wondering, what game are you going to do, Cooper? You got week 6. You got a bunch of teams and a bunch of games that it's going to be very interesting this weekend. And I decided, why not do a game that's in prime time and that I think that a lot of people think that maybe a blowout or necessarily, one of these teams don't really have a chance. So, you know what? Let's go ahead. Kentucky and Georgia is the matchup this week that I'll be doing. I'm excited for this game because I think this is a good game because Georgia is going to be very interesting to watch. But also, Ray Davis, the running back at Kentucky, that man is special. And if Georgia cannot play good enough defense against Kentucky's run game, Kentucky's going to run laps all over Georgia. So, very interesting game that we are going to be seeing live here on Saber Broadcast Network Saturday at 6 o'clock. So you don't want to miss it. Of course, this is a 20 against 4. I mean, not 4, but 20 against 1. I don't know why I said 4. Either way, 20 against 1. This is going to be fun to watch. And of course, we're going to get into previewing it a little bit later Saturday. And so very interesting game when it comes to Kentucky and Georgia. So I do have a question right here about, do you do fantasy football as well? I actually have not talked a lot about fantasy football, but I have, like, I do, I do work with my own fantasy team a little bit, and I wouldn't say I'm doing incredibly, but I mean, I think my strategy with fantasy football is stick with the team that you got whenever you draft and don't make a lot of trades or acquisitions of any kind and just stick with your team. And then you could have a very successful team because who knows when your players may start to play really good. So, all right. Of course, as you can see on the screen, games gonna be Kentucky and Georgia. That's Saturday, 6 o'clock. And so we have a lot of stuff coming up here on the channel. So don't forget to tune in Saturday morning at 9:30 All right, everybody, welcome back to SBN College Football Saturdays. And after that, I am finally back. And so, also one thing I forgot to show during me and Derek's segment on Auburn is I forgot to show our games picked records for the SEC picks. So that is how we are doing. So I apologize for um not showing that before. So, of course, we've got a lot coming up here today within college football. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to preview Maryland and Ohio State, Alabama, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Texas. And then we're going to preview Kentucky and Georgia. And then we got our game picks right at the end. So let's go ahead and talk about Maryland and Ohio State. So, um, excuse me. Um, so Maryland, Ohio State. What do we see out of this game? So far, you got two undefeated teams coming in. Of course, Maryland's got Talia Tungavailoa as their quarterback. Ohio State's got Kyle McCord. So when I look at this game, I really see a game where it's going to have to be very. If Maryland wants a chance to win, Talia Tungavailoa is going to have to play a great game. For Ohio State to win, it's going to have to be that offense is just going to have to control the game. So, we look at some of the stats. Kyle McCord is 74 of 113 on the season, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. Running the running game, Henderson's got 44 attempts for 5 touchdowns, 295 yards on that as well. So he's averaging 6.7 yards per carry. So then Trainum is second. He's carried the ball 25 times, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. Williams, 19 carries, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then you look at the passing game. It's been distributed very well. Marvin Harrison Jr., 17 for 336 and 3 touchdowns. Emeka Abuga, 19 for 263 and 3 touchdowns. Stover, 17 receptions, 240 yards. Fleming, 13 for 108. So that is the leaders of Ohio State as far as the stats are concerned. So, I mean, they've gotten the ball to a lot of different players so far this season. Very balanced team. And then we look at Maryland. Talia Tungavailoa is 111 for 169, 1,464 yards passing, 65% completion percentage, and he's got 13 touchdowns to go along with 3 interceptions on the season. Oh, the run game. Hemby, 64 carries, 309 for 309 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging 4.8 yards per carry. McDonald, 26 carries, 204 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's 7.8. So 7.8 yards on the average. Littleton, 37 carries, 164 yards, 4.4 yards of average, and he's got a touchdown. Talia has carried it 14 times for 68 yards, they're about a 4.9 yard average, 3 touchdowns. And then Edwards, 5 carries, 26 yards, touchdown, 5.2 yards is the average there for Maryland. And then if you look at the receiving game, Jones, 19 for 319, 2 touchdowns at 16.8 yards of the average. Felton, 18 for 299, 3 touchdowns. Prather, 18 for 254, 3 touchdowns. Dyches, 18 for 214 and a touchdown. Smith Jr., 11 for 122, touchdown. And then Hemby, 12 for 117. And so that is what you see stats-wise. Talia, to me, he's got to be the difference in this game, I feel like, because I feel like you know what Ohio State's going to do. Ohio State is my number 1 team. So I do believe Ohio State's a whole lot better. But if you are But if you are Ohio State, you cannot let Talia get going because he is a really great quarterback. And that's what Maryland's got going for them. Um, so for Ohio State, you got to stop Talia Tungavailoa, and then if you're Maryland, you got to get him going. You got to make sure he feels comfortable all game long, and if as long as he does, Maryland can keep this close. So, all right, let's talk about Alabama and Texas A&M. Last time these two faced off against each other in College Station, as most know, Texas A&M would walk it off with the field goal. And then, of course, last year it was a one-score game. Of course, Alabama just surviving in that one last year. So, how does these two teams win? Well, if you're Alabama, it's got to be Milrow's got to feel comfortable today, and it's a 2:30 game in College Station, so anything can happen. But Alabama's got to be able to control themselves and play good football. And last week, if I believe correctly, they've only threw the football like 12 times and just ran the ball. So, I mean, that's what I think they got to get to in this game. And then for A&M, Max Johnson's got to get going, and he's got to play really good football. I think for both teams, it comes down to quarterbacks and how do they play. And really, how does your receivers play? I mean, A&M definitely with Anaya Smith has probably got about the best receiver out of the two teams. And so I think for both of them, it comes down to how does your quarterback play? But then I think the one difference here is that Alabama's defense to me feels like they are a whole lot better than what A&M's defense is. So how do both defenses play? I think Bama's is a whole lot better. And then if Bama gives Max Johnson trouble, I feel like then Alabama's got a clear advantage in this game. And Alabama's just got to control the game. And I think Milrow, he's just got to control himself and just play good complementary football. I think that's how Alabama wins this game. And so, I mean, let me real quick get some little stats pulled up. All right. So for Alabama, Milrow is 54 of 78, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions so far. And then you look at the run game. Alabama, really, I mean, let's see. Jace McClellan has carried the ball the most, 67 carries, 326 yards, 3 touchdowns. Roy L. Williams, 48 carries, 242 yards, 1 touchdown. Jalen Milrow, 49 carries, 189 yards, 4 touchdowns. Haynes, 8 carries, 51 yards. Tyler Buckner, 3 carries, 20 yards, a touchdown. So, I mean, a lot of running being done by Alabama. And then we look at the receiving game, and not a lot going because Bama's just they're a run team this season. Jermaine Burton, leading receiver, 8 receptions, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns. Isaiah Bond, 12 for 179 and a touchdown. Nye Black, 8 for 158 and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, not a lot of passing being done at Alabama this season. So yeah, it's going to come down to who controls the game. I think Bama's got an advantage in this game, but that's just me. All right, let's talk about Oklahoma and Texas. So last week we had Oklahoma here on the channel, and my goodness, that offense is legit. Dylan Gabriel, he did a lot of things that I loved watching. he would bulldoze players and run it in himself for the touchdown. His deep ball accuracy is incredible. His receivers, I feel like, are really good. This is like night and day between last year and this year for Oklahoma. Because if you remember last year, they did not look good. And the reason why I say that is because they started out looking good. Then Dylan Gabriel got hurt. And that's the thing. It's like Dylan Gabriel, had he played most of last season, how does Oklahoma do? That is, I mean, to me, I feel like that's a good question because he, I feel like, was the key to them being successful. So I think today it's going to come down to how does Dylan Gabriel play against that defense of Texas? Because Texas, I think, has a really good defense. And so we'll see what happens, but it's going to be interesting because I think that offense of Oklahoma definitely is elite. But then also Texas offense is very good. So I'm interested. Very interesting game here today. So I mean, games being played in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. So it's going to be interesting to see how this game goes for sure. And then finally we got Kentucky and Georgia. So really it comes down to you got Brock Bowers on one side for Georgia. You've got Ray Davis on the other side for Kentucky. How does this run defense of Georgia do against Ray Davis, the running back of Kentucky? Because that's my thing. It's like last week they gave up like 200 yards, like over 200 yards to Auburn rushing. You can't do that and expect to win against Kentucky. Excuse me. So the thing is, tonight I'm going to be calling this game. It's going to be fun to see. But, Kentucky, they just got to run the football. As long as they run the football, then I feel like they're fine. They truly are fine in this game. So it's going to be fun to watch. Carson Beck, though, the quarterback at Georgia, I thought he looked good for his first road start like that at Auburn. It wasn't incredible, but I thought he did good enough for a first start on the road. So you can't you can't really be too negative about that. So, Brock Bowers, he's got to find Brock Bowers to be successful because Brock Bowers, second half, exploded and played a good game. So, okay. So right now, let's go to commercial break, and then I'm going to have the game picks, and I will let you know what the answers to those questions were. So we'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. So, we had two questions during SEC wraparound, so we're going to go ahead and give them to you, the answers. So, what was Auburn's win streak versus the number one ranked team? And that was 4 straight wins until Georgia came in last week and beat them at home. And then who coached Auburn and Georgia in the same sport? Shug Jordan in basketball. So that is your answers for that. And so this week, Colton and Jack are not going to pick games. They were busy this morning. So it's all me this week. So, of course, there's your games picks record. Of course, I forgot to show it during SEC wraparound how SEC picks are going. That is our SEC picks. And then here is college football wraparound picks. So it is time to get the picks. And we've got about 6 games coming up today that I'm going to pick. And so we start with Arkansas and Ole Miss. Now, this game is going to come down to how does Arkansas play as far as the offense is concerned. I want to see how they do. And then I feel like their defense is going to hold Ole Miss in check more than what LSU's did. So this game, I'm going to go Ole Miss because that's what I said earlier. And I think this is, if you had to pick a score on this, I think Ole Miss probably like a 28-24 type game is accurate. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I just think Ole Miss will win this game because I think Ole Miss is the better team. Notre Dame and Louisville. That's coming up in prime time tonight. Really, it comes down to Sam Hartman against Jack Plummer. I mean, Notre Dame, after their loss to Ohio State and then the way they played last week, I haven't really been as impressed with Notre Dame. And so I do feel like they will end up winning this game, but I feel like this is a low-scoring game just like it was last week for Notre Dame. And if you had to pick a score, probably in the 21 to 19 range, something like that. I just don't see Notre Dame really playing good offense like they did early in the season. And really, now they've gotten to some decent games and they've been struggling a little bit. So I'm going Notre Dame, but in a close game. LSU and Missouri. This is interesting because I do have Missouri picked for the upset. And they're playing at home. LSU to me just does not. Their secondary is terrible. So Missouri has got to exploit that secondary of LSU. If they can do that, this game's going to be about the same way as it was for LSU last week against Ole Miss. It's going to be in that 55 to 49 range again for LSU. Really, if I had to pick a score, I would say 56-52 would be accurate for this game because I just don't. LSU's defense is not selling me because they're just not good. So I got Missouri 56-52 in this game. Maryland and Ohio State. I got the Buckeyes. I think Ohio State's too good for Maryland. Ohio State's my top team because they have the best. Besides Texas beating Alabama at Alabama, Ohio State's got the best win of the season to this point. And so I got to go Ohio State on this game. I'm thinking like 38-24 in this game. Maryland, I feel like, will do some damage to that defense of Ohio State, but then it's just not enough. I think Ohio State's too good for Maryland. Alabama and Texas A&M. I had Alabama picked earlier. I'm going to stick with Bama. And the reason why I think Alabama will win this game, I think it's going to be in that 27-24 range. Milroe, I think he's got to, like the broken plays where he can run it himself. That's the place where he excels. I think we all know that. So that's where I think Bama's got to play. And so I got to go Bama on this game. and 27-24 against Texas A&M. I think that's an accurate score for the game. And then finally, the Red River rivalry coming up here in just a few minutes. Oklahoma, Texas. I got to go Texas. I think Texas has had a good season. I'm going to stick with them. I think it's going to be a shootout. Give me Texas, but I want to say in the 45-42 range. I think that's what you're going to see coming up here in just a few minutes. So, yep, that is my game picks for today. Of course, tonight we've got Kentucky and Georgia. That's coming up. That's going to be fun. But for now, this is SBN College Football Saturdays. We want to thank you for watching. And we will see you again tonight at 6 o'clock for Kentucky and Georgia. Goodbye, everybody.